At first, I intended to make a video only about the triumvirate and hero. However, during the initial part of the research phase of my video making process, I figured that I might as well also do an overview of the Protectorate and the PRT. That said, I do want to say that I probably won't be going into extensive detail about either, but I can't really say for certain. As is typical, I tend to give information I personally found to be of potential interest or importance. I'd call it a generalized view, but that may not always be the most accurate descriptor. Besides, even if this turns out to be longer than I expected, I doubt I'll go into every extraneous detail. I mean, sure, those will be present here and there, but not too much. For those who do want that experience, there is a master reference for the PRT and to an extent the Protectorate detailing most, if not all, you would care to know about said organizations. Things like employment and promotion requirements, for example. That said, against my better judgment, I think I'll begin with the Protectorate. It was founded by legend Alexandria Eidolon and Hero. It was by far the largest superhero organization in the world, at least that we know of, which is not too much of a surprise, since not only were they based in the United States, a high population country, they were also funded and given legitimacy by the United States government, which, accordingly, gave them significant freedom to operate bases in various cities across the country. Additionally, with time, they were able to expand operations into Canada, with talks of potential expansion into Mexico. Though, in a broader sense, they were generally more easily able to operate in other countries when the need arose, specifically when it concerned endbringer attacks, and, in all likelihood, more natural disasters and whatnot. In terms of membership, when it comes to inferred information, it can be safely assumed that things such as psychological and physical screenings did happen. Additionally, given the nature of the Protectorate, there was more than likely some level of extensive power testing too. What that may have looked like or how they would have gone about doing such tests is, to my knowledge, unknown. Right. When it comes to more concrete information, we do know that there is a 1-year junior membership period, with a yearly salary of $78,780. Though, depending on the nature of a cape's power and skill set, the location a cape was based in, and other relevant factors, said salary could be adjusted. As for their place in the organizational hierarchy, they were typically not allowed to lead teams and did not have the same privileges as full members to access confidential information and sensitive materials, at least under normal circumstances. Interestingly, while on the topic of recruitment, an aspect of the Protectorate that is much less well known to the wider public, and to an extent even to those within the organization itself, is the recruitment of former villains. Something, as one can imagine, isn't advertised, since it's easy to create the misunderstanding that said villains are, in some way, getting away with their illegal activities and are even being rewarded, regardless of the fact that said potential probationary members are not simply let in. They must be vouched for by a trusted individual, and even with the latter, what followed was an extensive debate on the pros and cons of inducting the villain in question. Topics included how they would potentially be rebranded and whether or not they are to be relocated to prevent potential complications related to their former identity. More so, even after all that was out of the way, there was usually a 5 to 15 or more years probationary term before a given villain is even granted that earlier outlined junior member status. Note that I am unsure about the monetary compensation probationary members receive in comparison to junior members. Regardless, whether someone is a probationary member or a junior member, upon full membership they receive a base salary of $112,810 a year along with greater permissions. Now then, as for recruits under 18, they are placed in a subdivision of the Protectorate called the wards. For them, they receive a yearly $50,000 stipend that is transferred to a trust fund, which can be accessed once they come of age. Alongside that, they are paid a minimum wage salary that is doubled upon full membership. I will note that I assume full membership is full membership and not full junior membership status, since I don't think the latter would make much sense. I'm probably overthinking this, but if we use Triumph and Weaver as examples, it does look like after one's 10 years award that one does become a full member out of the gate. additionally bolstered by the fact that wards can be colloquially described as junior members. So it would be odd to make someone who had already been in the organization for who knows how many years as a ward undergo another trial phase, but fair enough, it may be a case-by-case basis sort of affair. Anyway, the wards, like the Protectorate, also had probationary members, with said probation period ending once they reached 18 years of age, and that is regardless of the exact context and or situation that landed them in probation in the first place. Note that both probationary wards and non-probationary wards are not allowed complete access to classified materials without prior permission. Okay then, since wards are under 18, there are also a multitude of additional restrictions, protocols, and requirements related to them. They must attend school during normal hours and maintain acceptable grades, lest they get their pay docked. Though, in the case of the first requirement, there are ways to circumvent it, such as being released from school early under the guise of vocational training or something else along those lines. They must also not be overworked and as such are required to consistently have a full night's rest. Though, should the need arise, wards can be rapidly awoken from sleep or taken out of school. Do note that if the latter is done, prior notice of some kind is preferred to minimize off-duty disruptions. And if that's not possible, it is encouraged that it be used sparingly lest outside parties choose to interject themselves into the situation. With all that out of the way, the last details to mention are the subjects of termination and the transferring of capes between departments. In the case of Protectorate members, the latter process need only require the permission of the cape, the permission of the current department, and the permission of the receiving department, with the terms of said transfer discussed between the relevant parties. The process of transferring a ward is much the same way, in terms of requiring various permissions, but more intermediaries are required to sign off on the transfer. Parents, teachers, psychiatrists, etc. As for terminations, it is a serious decision to make for a department because it is not a simple matter, to say the least, to remove a parahuman that has been privy to the inner workings of their organization and the secrets that come with that. So, if the topic of termination is brought up, a tribunal is called to extensively go over a given case to determine if an alternate punishment can be given, or if a simple transfer to another department may alleviate the issue or issues in question. If the latter options are not possible, the terminated parahuman may be put under indefinite suspension, be fired and put under supervision, arrested and jailed, or, in extreme cases, executed. So, in hindsight, I maybe should have started with the PRT, but oh well. PRT stands for Parahuman Response Team, and it is the umbrella organization that encompasses not only the Protectorate, but various other organizations and programs. It is a paramilitary body that's similar to SWAT, but with a focus on handling parahumans in the aftermath of cases involving said parahumans. This may be a little confusing, but while the Protectorate is an independent organization, during its formation it was agreed upon that they would be under government oversight and be required to follow a set of laws related to capes, well, parahumans. I partially alluded to this earlier, but to make it clear, the PRT is the organization in charge of administrating and directing the Protectorate. As such, those earlier mentioned wages and salaries and such were handled by, well, the PRT. To go into a little more detail on how the two work together, while each given PRT department did have a corresponding Protectorate team assigned to it, where the Protectorate's local HQ was, could be a location separate from where the local PRT division was stationed. Continuing on, while it can be an easy assumption to make, not all parahumans are put under the specific umbrella of the Protectorate. There are parahumans within the structure of the PRT, some official, some not so much per se. The ones with official involvement that we know of are those within Watchdog and those related to the MIRIS program. For the latter, there isn't too much to go on, but what is known is that it was meant to promote and assist rogues, capes that were neutral in the sense that they did not display confrontational and or combatant behavior. To add on to that, they also either didn't use their powers, or, if they did, they were used in a way that wasn't specifically villainous or heroic. To put it in colloquial terms, if the parahumans in question weren't involved in the metaphorical cops and robbers game happening between the heroes and villains, they were rogues. Evidently, it wasn't that clear-cut all the time, since there is a question of how far someone can use their powers for themselves, for a business, or for society before someone else sees said parahumans in a certain light. Anyway, I've gotten a little sidetracked, but yeah, those are the types of people the MIRIS program were supposed to help. Unfortunately, the program is functionally defunct. It still exists, but between defunding and various setbacks, it's barely existing. Watchdog, on the other hand, was functioning just fine, at least comparatively. The Protectorate can be considered where the frontline capes are put, capes that dealt with the more in-your-face aspects of parahumans. Watchdog was the PRT-controlled group consisting of powered and non-powered individuals with concerns related more to the subversive side of parahuman affairs. Some of the things they dealt with were potential disruptions in the political, financial, and legal spheres, both domestic and international. The most well-known way they did this was through a network of thinker think tanks who each sifted through mountains of data, with each group acting relatively independent from one another. Why? Well, should one think tank find a lead, the others can try to expand that lead in their own ways while subsequently building upon each other to cover any weaknesses each individual think tank may have. Note that on paper, the parahumans are the ones that analyze the data, while the non-parahumans are the ones who worry about acquiring said data, but what is stated on paper is not always the exact truth. In that regard, while the perception of Watchdog being more along the lines of a 9-to-5 office job isn't wrong, there is more to it than that. Watchdog does regularly conduct fieldwork of varying scales, be they overt or covert in nature, with some examples being raids, interrogations, meetings with individuals in power, and general investigations on potential things of concern. As such, while thinkers may be the most well-known class of parahumans within the organization, tinkers and potentially strangers were also utilized, along with any other parahumans that may be useful and more suited for behind-the-scenes work. Shifting focus back to the main PRT itself, Watchdog also served the additional function of acting as a form of internal affairs, to make sure there wasn't anything shady happening within the PRT, among other likely more mundane things that may get in the way of operations. But I will say that while Watchdog likely did concern themselves with rooting out subversive elements within the PRT, be they parahuman in nature or not, those rooting out efforts probably did not apply to the earlier noted, unofficial or more descriptively off-the-record PRT parahumans. There are some PRT employees that are known to be parahumans but for a variety of reasons are allowed to stay within the main PRT instead of being sent to a subgroup like Watchdog or the Protectorate. They exist as a well-kept but known secret. However, I will mention that there are some Protectorate capes that do officially maintain a secondary PRT job. Accordingly, there are likely Watchdog capes that do too. Right, with all that out of the way, let's move on to the other aspects of the parahuman response team. For one, despite their initial outward appearance of a combative paramilitary group, they are predominantly an organization concerned with PR, since, at the end of the day, they much rather integrate parahumans into society and have stray parahumans join the Protectorate rather than fight it. The more overt way they do this is through portraying heroes, and consequently parahumans in general, in a positive light in media and entertainment. The less overt ways involve assisting capes in traveling and giving heroes assistance in relation to how they portray themselves in public and during interviews. In more extreme cases, the PRT does downplay the severity and seriousness of affairs relating to parahumans. While there are those who may take issue with such actions, the potentially controversial omission of specific details and/or suppression of information is, in the end of the day, meant to mitigate public fear and distress. As questionable as it sounds, there are times where it is better for the masses to remain ignorant. After all, given our own world, it is not difficult to imagine someone using one villain's threat to, let's say, knock the moon out of orbit as a basis to condemn and demonize all parahumans. Though, evidently, it's really up to you to decide whether or not the PRT's actions are acceptable, even with the context of presumed good intentions. Nevertheless, that's all I wanted to say, at least for matters more directly pertaining to the workings of the PRT and Protectorate. However, there is one more organization that is significantly tied to the latter two, the Youth Guard. They are not under the umbrella of the PRT, they operate as their own separate entity. And if anything, if the PRT holds power over the Protectorate, then the Youth Guard in a similar but different way holds power over the PRT, when it concerns the wards. I mentioned earlier that due to their age that the wards had extra requirements for its members that the PRT and Protectorate had to adhere to. That was not always the case, at least to the extent seen in more contemporary times. In the earlier years of the wards, it can only be inferred that they were treated much more like adult members, and as such found their lives disrupted significantly more. Evidently, the parents of this earlier generation or generations of wards took issue with this, and through a series of events and actions, along with the accumulation of mass public support, were able to get a court ruling that required what was at the time a relatively small group be placed in a position to oversee and maintain the well-being of wards. In the years following that key court ruling, the Youth Guard grew from that initial small group and became a much larger organization, to the extent that it was not uncommon to see their badges and stickers across the states. Though, more importantly, with following court rulings, they were able to progressively hold more organizational power over the PRT when it came to how child parahumans were managed. I haven't done this in a while, but here is a screenshot of their mission statement. Rather than having me try to explain it or read it to you, I'll let you, read it yourself. Let it give you a clear idea of what they stood for, at least when it pertains to what they wanted to show the public. Well then, at least when it comes to straight information, barring things I didn't want to include or things I may have forgotten/missed, I have nothing much else to say, but to let out a few more thoughts about the Youth Guard specifically, while they do evidently have a strong focus on the wards, given the displayed mission statement, it is a safe assumption that they also concern themselves to an unknown extent with child parahumans and groups not involved with the PRT and Protectorate. With that, I'm done. Bye.